Good afternoon. I'm Melissa Samuels, Director of Alumni Programs at the Albany Alumni Association. I'm glad you could join us today for our program on professionalism. Before we get started, I have just a couple of housekeeping items I'd like to go over. First, we will be recording the webinar, and I will share a copy of the link when it's ready, probably early next week. We'll also be doing a Q&A at the end of the session. So if you have questions for our presenter, please put them in the Q&A and not in the chat. They might get overlooked there. So let's get started. I'm happy to introduce our presenter today, Dena Quinones. Dena is the CEO of DQ Impact, a workplace wellness company that helps organizations develop a workplace culture that supports employees and enhances business. Dena also serves as faculty at Montclair State University in the Department of Public Health. Dena is a leader, coach, facilitator, and curriculum developer who brings over 20 years of experience in nonprofit and for-profit organizational development at the local and national level. So she's a very busy lady. Dena, we're really excited to have you here today, and I'm going to turn things over to you.
I am excited to talk about our topic because it's very, very important. But the first thing I like to do is for all of us to just take a deep breath, right? One of the things that we're going to talk about today is professional self-care, which is very different than personal self-care. Some of you may be working from home. Some of you may be in the office or just taking a lunch break, listening or looking at this while taking lunch, but it's midday. So wherever we are, I would like for us to just take a collective deep breath to relax, to just be able to focus on our webinar today, and to just collectively come together to prepare for this really great discussion that we're going to have and all of the great information that you're going to receive. So I ask you to just get comfortable in wherever you are, and please just take a deep breath. Just breathe with me. We're going to inhale for 3, hold for 3, and exhale for 3, and then we will begin. So get comfortable, close your eyes if it serves you, and just inhale for 1, 2, 3, hold for 2, 3, 1. Exhale for 1, 2, 3. And just become present, and you'll understand by the end of this presentation why this is so important. And this is the first tip that you're receiving. This is free and accessible and can be done any place or time, whether you're in a crowded room or you need to step away, or you're in your office or your room. Your breath will help you through any situation. Because the things that we're talking about today, some of it is common sense, some of it may be a reminder, some of it may be new information, but some of it is not easy to practice all the time. However, when discussing professionalism and professional persona and professional boundaries, your breath is the first thing that you will go to. So I'm just going to pull up the PowerPoint. And so today, by the end of this webinar, you will learn about the importance of professionalism in the workplace, the importance of professional boundaries for a successful career, and some tips and best practices for creating a professional persona and setting professional boundaries. Although I will be providing lots of information and some tips, there are plenty of opportunities for you to participate in the chat, and I would love for us to share some additional strategies that may come to mind as we go through the presentation, or you may be already implementing. There is such strength and impact in shared learning and shared experiences. And so I look forward to sharing my experiences and the knowledge that I have to help all of you with your professional careers, whether you're a student who just graduated. Congratulations to all the graduates, by the way. If you are someone who is new in your profession, new into the workforce, or have been in your profession for a long time, all of this information is relevant. I like to start with one of my favorite quotes. If you do something you love, you'll never have to work a day in your life. And we may have said this or heard variations of this throughout our course of life. And it's very true. We spend a majority of our day, whether working remotely or going into the office, at our job, or working or thinking about our employment in some capacity. We may have heard you leave work at work and home at home. But I disagree with that concept. I feel that we are human and that it is impossible to just turn off emotions and feelings like a switch. And so if you work if you work in a profession, if you love your job, it does not feel like work. And that is always a great thing. And I like to start off with that, right? For anyone who may be feeling a little bit overwhelmed or not knowing what to do, or maybe a little bit burned out, always go back to the why. Why are you doing the work that you're doing? Why do you love it or not love it? Right? No right or wrong, just self-awareness. And there will be a lot of self-awareness throughout this webinar. In terms of professionalism, I also love this quote as well. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. And we'll take a deeper dive into that because that is such a profound statement. The reality is that there are second chances, but there's always and just one first impression. And we'll talk about how boundaries, professionalism, professional self-care always give you the opportunity to make a great first impression or rebound for that second chance or that second meeting. For any of you who are wondering, is professionalize or professionalizing really a word? Yes, it is. So if anyone who knows me or has experienced any of my workshops or teachings knows that I start with a definition. I like for all of us to be on the same page around what we are speaking about. We may all have an idea of what a word means, but I like for us to come together and be on the same page for how we're defining certain terms. And so professionalize, according to Google and the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is a word, and it is to give a professional character or status to, make into, establish as a profession, or to become a professional or give a professional character. So yes, we are professionalizing and becoming more professional than we already are. And so what is professionalism and why is it important? How you behave at work can affect everything from your relationship with coworkers to finding new opportunities for advancement. Your behavior can bolster your professional reputation and boost your career almost as much as your skills and experiences do. Research has actually also shown that a person is hired or promoted not based on their knowledge, not based on their skill set, but based on their level of professionalism. And we'll discuss how there are several layers and components that contribute to professionalism, way more than your IQ, your expertise, or even your proficiency. Employees who show professionalism at work are often productive, motivated, and perform at their highest levels. Colleagues and clients also enjoy working with them, and they might transition into leadership roles. So again, how you show up and how you interact with your colleagues and your coworkers impact your professionalism. And so some definitions, right? Professionalism is the conduct, aims, or qualities that characterize or mark a profession or a professional. So what is a profession? What does that mean? A profession is a calling requiring specialized knowledge and often long and intensive academic preparation. And so a profession is just anything that you study and acquire knowledge and acquire skill sets around, and then use your profession to go into a professional career. So it's basically a set of qualities and skills that help to convey your expertise, your competence, and knowledge. But we'll talk a little bit why it does not stop there. More importantly, professionalism is not just the job you do, it's how you do the job, right? It's not just going in, completing a task. It's your interpersonal skills. It's what you do in preparation before you get to work and what you do when you also leave the job. And sometimes folks don't make that connection. They may go to their employer or go to their job and feel that once they clock out or they leave or Friday comes, your job is done. But the reality is your personal life and the things you do outside of the office, it significantly impacts how you can show up professionally and execute professionalism while you are at work. Professionalism involves consistently achieving high standards, both visibly and behind the scenes. Whatever your role or your profession is, whatever level you are working within, it's about consistently achieving high standards. Why is this important? Because we are human and we are not perfect. So what does that mean? We will make mistakes. There are things that may happen beyond our control. when we are consistently providing professional standards and working at our highest standards, that gives us leeway for those bumps in the road that we occur along the way. Professionalism also contributes to your professional persona. So I also like to define professional persona. I simply like to say that your professional persona is your reputation, your branding, how you conduct yourself, how you want people to remember you. It's your personal, I say, stamp, right, of who you are as a professional in the workplace. And so it's important because sometimes what we do outside of our workplace may be different than within our workplace. So a professional persona is very important because it shows those you work with, for, how you conduct yourself. It shows how your commitment to your profession. And so it's the way you conduct yourself publicly in business settings, how you continue to represent your job, even outside of the office or business setting. It's the image that you project to your coworkers and colleagues, the way you present yourself overall professionally. And most importantly, it dictates what people say about you when it comes to your profession and how you conduct yourself in the workplace. So when do you create your personal persona? And I forgot to mention, I just want to say that there will be time for question and answers after, but please feel free as questions come along, and I may switch from topic to topic, to drop your questions in the chat so that as many of them can be addressed at the end of the presentation. So when do you create your personal persona? And I would actually like to just give folks a moment, if you're comfortable. For those who are here, what do you think, when do you create a personal persona? When do you think that begins or starts to be created? If folks want to just drop a few words into the chat around when you think they are created. Just from the beginning, during the interview process, on the first time of contact. Thank you for all of you who responded. Yes, all of those that were written are correct. And the reality is that your professional persona is being created all the time, whether you realize it or not. There are ways that you intentionally can contribute to your personal persona, your professional persona. But then there are times that who you are and how you conduct yourself have already contributed to your professional persona. I'll give an example. As I was growing up, I was never afraid to do public speaking. I would always raise my hand, ask questions, participate. I would be a really good writer in high school and continuing to do presentations. So within, from elementary school to high school to college, that was, what I was known for as a student and just as a person. Oh, Dena will always go and speak to someone or speak in public. So what has happened? And now in my professional career, it is not a coincidence that I'm doing presentations and public speaking. And what I often hear from those that I still keep in contact with or who know me from college or from middle school, they always say, oh, I'm not surprised you're doing what you're doing, that you're teaching, that you're writing, because you were always good at that. Right. So something to keep in mind is that your professional persona is something that is always being created, even when you're not working. And it's something that you personally and your qualities and skills have contributed to. And so I just like to highlight that, because a lot of people think that professionalism only occurs on the job, and it does not. And so that's why you always have to be mindful of how you're conducting yourself. But we'll stay focused on being professional in the workplace, but being mindful and self-aware of how your personal life does impact your professional life. So I have a few visuals that I would like to go over around creating a professional persona. So a professional persona is being created in the ways that you conduct yourself, how you conduct yourself on the job, and yes, during the interview process, even when you send your resume. I often remind my students that the first impression does not occur during the interview. It occurs with the resume, right? And it occurs with what it is, with continuous self-assessment and with continuous knowing where you want to go in your professional career. So some additional elements, aside from the continuous assessing yourself, how you're developing your skills, how you're performing on the job, there are outside forces that impact your professional persona as well. It's your email address. I just mentioned that the first impression is often made on your resume. What is your email address? Is it a professional? Is it appropriate? There should not be nicknames. There should not be a long, really complicated letters, numbers, and symbols, and so on. It should be a professional email address that you check regularly. Okay. It also, on your resume, you have your phone number. So a lot of times employers are still calling folks for interviews. A lot of times it may be through email, but in the event that you are being called for an interview, you want to make sure that your voicemail is also professionally appropriate. With email, voicemail, written communication, what's most important is that one of the most important things, not most important, one of the most important things is that you check them. Check your email, check your voicemail when you are corresponding, whether it's looking for a job or even corresponding with your employer. Written communication is very important as well. And I have another slide to just go over a few elements of that. But social media persona is one that everyone should pay close attention to. Technology is the way of the world. Social media is the way of the world for not only personal use, but also professional development and professional use. There are a lot of positions in various fields where social media is used professionally. And yes, all of the stories that you've heard about the person who calls out sick and gets fired or written up because they posted it on their social media, that is true. Employers do look at your social media before they hire you, before they schedule an interview. So when you are in a particular profession or entering into a profession, it's very important to know what your social media persona is and what social media platforms are the best for your profession. There are some professions where certain social media platforms are not allowed. But just in general, knowing how you're presenting yourself in social media, even though some folks may feel, well, this is my personal life, this is my account. Yes, that is true. But we do not live in the world where there is privacy anymore. And how you conduct yourself on social media will impact some of your professional opportunities. In terms of professional written communication, just want to take a moment and ask folks to look at this diagram, because I think that although this is focusing on email, this is also applicable for social media communications as well as text communications. A lot of employers now give employees phones to be able to communicate, to be able to text and email for various reasons. And how you communicate professionally is something that you want to keep in mind. And even if you're using your personal phone, if you're emailing, if you're texting or corresponding with somebody from your job through social media or through text, you still want to maintain professionalism, even if the other person is not. What I like to say about professionalism in general is that you cannot control how another person acts. You can only control how you react and how you act and conduct yourself. So even if it can be your administrator, your supervisor, the CEO or executive director that is acting inappropriately or unprofessionally, you should always act professionally. I like to compare it to the saying, it's better to be overdressed than underdressed. It's better to act unprofessional than act unprofessional. Kind of like it's better to be safe than sorry, right? When you're at work, in the workplace, always maintain professionalism, particularly in written communication. Things like your font style, emoticons, spelling and grammar, the length, greeting, and subject line. These all impact how professional your email may come across. So again, you want to keep these things into consideration and always use your spell check and your grammar check. And one tip I like to say is always reread it. Sometimes spelling in the grammar check does make corrections, but not necessarily in the way that you may want. And that may then tarnish the written communication that you were trying to professionally put forth. There are 8 core characteristics of professionalism, and I'm going to quickly focus on them. The first is knowledge. Professionalism involves developing detailed, up-to-date knowledge at every stage of your career. You can strive to master your role and keep adding to what you know. And so the key phrase around knowledge is up-to-date knowledge. A lot of folks may present research or may present data that is not up to date. So even though you may be knowledgeable on the topic, if the data is not up to date, that contributes to lack of preparation and how you may be viewed professionally. It's also important to put your knowledge into action. When you have knowledge, up-to-date knowledge, and accurate knowledge, you can feel confident to show what you know. Not always for self-promotion, but to help yourself and to help others succeed. When you're confident in what you are presenting and what you say, it makes you feel better, and it helps your audience as well. You want to be conscientious. It involves being reliable, setting your own high standards, and showing that you care about every aspect of your job. And I'll say that again, every aspect of your job. That's because it's unrealistic to love every minute of your job, even if you love your profession and you love the work that you do. There are stressful moments. There are high volume moments. And so there are also certain aspects of your job that you may like better than others. But the key to being conscientious in professionalism is liking all parts of the job, even the not so enjoyable parts. It's about being organized, paying attention to detail, and also holding yourself accountable for your thoughts, your words, and your actions. But we don't want to confuse conscientiousness with working longer hours than everyone else or obsessing over details. Yes, being detail-oriented is important, but perfectionism can be a deterrent, and working long hours contributes to poor personal care and professional self-care. And you'll see how professional self-care is key in having a great professional persona and maintaining professionalism. And so true professionals plan and prioritize work, but they don't let perfectionism hold them back and do not prioritize to the point of letting personal self-care go. Professionalism involves integrity, and integrity is what keeps professionals true to their word. It stops them from compromising their values, even if it means taking a harder road. It's about being ethical, and it's about creating trust. And it's bound up with being honest with yourself and to the people that you meet, that you work with, and you work for. It allows for you to emanate authenticity in the work that you do. Respect is another core component. It means being a role model for politeness and good manners to everyone, not just to those you need to impress, or not just to those that you like. In a professional world and in any profession, you're not going to get along with everyone that you work with. Sometimes you may be a part of a great team. Sometimes you may be a part of a team where everyone doesn't get along so much. But when there is respect, the work still gets done. And so you want to respect everyone. And I like to say also respect yourself. Respecting everyone allows you to respect yourself and allows you to operate in a way where you're respected. And you show that you truly respect other people by taking their needs into account and by helping to uphold their rights and their needs and their wants. And so we'll talk about how respect comes in a lot with professional self-care as well. And then there's one of my favorites, emotional intelligence. And so emotional intelligence is a pillar in professionalism. To be a true professional, you need to stay professional even under pressure, under extenuating circumstances, and when others are not conveying professionalism when they are interacting with you. It takes strategies for managing your emotions, plus a clear awareness of other people's feelings. So sometimes sometimes professionalism means keeping your emotions in check. Why is this so important? Research has also shown that employers value those with higher emotional intelligence than a higher IQ. So when you can control your emotions, you're able to have better relationships and do a better job, which has nothing to do with how smart or intelligent you are or with your IQ, which is why you may sometimes find those with extremely high IQs may not function the best within teams and may not show up professionally, even though the person may be brilliant. That's because being brilliant and being smart or even book smart is very different and is a totally different skill set than managing your emotions. A big part of professionalism is appropriateness. And it starts with knowing what is appropriate for your profession, what is appropriate for your field, for your job, and then what is appropriate for your role. That's anywhere from how you interact with a client to how you may dress. So appropriateness starts with knowing from your employer what exactly that means. But in general, it's knowing what is appropriate in terms of dress, personal grooming, right? Physical touch. All of these things, there are levels and different variations of appropriateness for different fields and for different workplace settings. And so having that awareness is important to be able to be appropriate and continue to be a professional. Appropriateness also covers the way you speak and write, the topics you choose to discuss at the workplace, and how you interact with others. So again, all of this is dictated by your role, your profession, and the work site. But in the end, it's up to you to execute these things, to dress appropriately, to interact appropriately with your clients, your colleagues, and be able to maintain your professionalism. I like to note here that although times have changed, even through the pandemic, with a lot of in-person services transitioning to virtual, a lot of workplaces going from in-person to remote or virtual, there are some key points that will never change. So even though timing has changed, workplace settings have changed, there are certain elements of professionalism that do not change, whether virtually or in person. And why I like to highlight this is that workplace settings and how work is being conducted is changing, is evolving at a rapid pace. And we are often now, especially as a result of the pandemic, not only changing workplace settings, but how services and work is being conducted. But either way, these are some staples that will never change. And no matter what setting you find yourself in, remembering some of these things are key. You want to be on time, whether it's for a virtual meeting or an in-person meeting. I like to talk a little bit about virtual meetings because some folks think that being on time for a virtual meeting is being logged on. That is incorrect. Being on time for a virtual meeting is being logged on and being present and ready to participate. Oftentimes, we find individuals will just log on while doing something else and multitasking. So, but the same way that you cannot show up for an in-person meeting, late or not prepared is the same way that you should not show up for a virtual meeting, particularly if this is the primary way that you're operating within the workplace. So you want to be on time and also be prepared. Whether it's in person or virtually, you must dress appropriately, right? So some may argue or some say that virtually you only have to dress from the top up. And that's fair enough. It's always only what, what you're going to present and feel the most comfortable. But, some folks have different opinions. Some people say getting fully dressed for an online meeting contributes to confidence, to feeling better. It also contributes to less mishaps, like getting up by mistake, and maybe forgetting that you have your pajama pants on, or you thought your camera was off and it was on. And so you want to dress appropriately, whether you're virtually or in person. And knowing what appropriately is, again, is dictated by your employer. You want to prepare for your meetings the same. Online, it is not a time to research or do other things while during the meeting. The same way you come to a in-person meeting prepared is you want to prepare in the same way virtually. Effective communication is always key in professionalism. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. And so once you always must communicate effectively and to be able to be taken seriously. And again, this contributes tremendously to your professional persona. You want to be reliable. You want to be known to show up for your meetings. You want to be able to and need to navigate and manage technology, right? There's a level of managing your technology in-person meetings as well as in virtual meetings. And you always must be present and be able to participate. So even though things have not changed, being professional virtually is more challenging. And so just a tip is to just remember that if you're in a virtual meeting, if you work remotely, you want to always be present and participate. And that can be done in a number of ways. There's lots of resources that give tips and YouTube videos on professionalism during Zoom. Some folks ask me, well, I have my camera off. My audio works better when my camera is off, or I can hear better with my camera off, and certain different situations. That's fine. You can still participate in a virtual meeting with your camera off. Be present in the chat. Use your reaction buttons. Participate in the polls. These are all things that contribute to still being able to show up and participate, even when there are some elements that may be off or challenging. So now that we've defined what professionalism is, the importance of professionalism, some of the core elements, how do you develop a positive professional persona and maintain professionalism? By boundaries. And so I want everyone to just take a moment and reflect. How do you set boundaries? Do you like setting boundaries? Do boundaries make you uncomfortable? Just take about 30 seconds and reflect around how you set boundaries in general, whether personal or professional. As you're reflecting, keep some of these things in mind around what is contributing to how you may set really great boundaries, or where there may be challenges around setting boundaries. Because everything starts with self-awareness. Once you have the awareness, you can then move forward and work on the skill, because professionalism is a skill set. I speak a lot about qualities and skills. I tell my students all the time, let's find your superpower and get paid to use it, right? Especially those who are graduating, thinking about career moves. What do you like to do and what do you do well? And so qualities are things that come naturally. But with skills, skills is when you acquire knowledge, put the knowledge to practice, and that's when you develop and become skillful, much like driving, right? No one is born knowing how to drive. We learn the basics about driving, we get our permit, we then practice the driving, we apply that knowledge to begin to practice. And then when we feel skilled enough, we take our road test and hopefully get our license. And so this is one thing to keep in mind around professional self-care, around professionalism, is that oftentimes it's a skill. And boundaries, whether personal or professional, is also a skill set. Some people can set boundaries very easily, and some people it takes practice. It takes acquiring knowledge. It takes the awareness, acquiring the knowledge, and then practicing to become skillful. And so what are boundaries and why are they important? And so I'm going to focus on professional boundaries, but we cannot focus on professional boundaries without first discussing personal boundaries. Personal boundaries are, I like to say, really fun because we get to say them, we get to set them, right? Each individual, I get to set all of my personal boundaries. I get to decide what my boundaries are. I get to implement them, and I decide, right, based on my beliefs and how I want to be treated, what my personal boundaries are. But professional boundaries are different. Professional boundaries are the legal, ethical, and organizational frameworks that protect both clients and employees or workers from physical and emotional harm and help to maintain a safe working environment. So when we set personal boundaries, we set boundaries, whether we realize it or not, to keep ourselves safe. We let people know how we like to be treated, how we want to be treated. And again, we get to decide what our personal boundaries are. But professional boundaries are very different. Professional boundaries are dictated by your employer and by your role, even though it's up to you to set them. And so sometimes professional boundaries are mutually understood, unspoken, physical, and emotional limits of the relationship between the patient, client, staff, and within your team. It's important to know that professional boundaries are set very differently. The boundaries that you set with your client are very different than the boundaries that you may set with your supervisor, than the boundaries that you may have to set with your colleagues on both personal and professional levels. But it's important to know that your professional boundaries, you can receive assistance and guidance and help with, as opposed to personal boundaries, it's totally up to you to be able to set them. Professional boundaries can be messy, they can be tricky, they can be unspoken, they can be unclear. But they provide limits that enable staff to interact with others in a professional setting. They create ground rules so that everyone knows what is accepted and how to behave in a workspace. It keeps you and everyone on your team clear about your role as well. Sometimes boundaries are crossed within colleagues and coworkers because a team member may be unclear about your role. So I always encourage that, especially if you're new, and this isn't from anything from internship to volunteering to what your role is at your job, you want to let everybody know what your role is. Because when everyone knows what your role is, they'll know what to ask you and what you can help with. And that creates an automatic boundary. Setting boundaries prevent you from burning out. When you don't set boundaries, you're saying yes to everything. You don't have time for yourself. And professionally, you don't have time. Your own workload may also be impacted because you don't have professional boundaries and you're helping out another coworker. But in general, not being able to set boundaries does lead to burnout. But most importantly, professional boundaries and personal boundaries allow you to take care of yourself. So what happens when someone does not have any boundaries? There are several things that happen, and everyone reacts differently from the lack of boundaries. But some of the most common things that happen are resentment. When you're in the workplace and you're not setting boundaries and you're constantly saying yes or working long hours, that may cause resentment. It may cause exploding anger. If you've ever had a coworker who has just started yelling at someone for no reason, then it may be because there's not a boundary there. Trying to please everyone, most people have problems setting a boundary because they don't want to disappoint someone. They do not want to damage a relationship or have just a hard time saying no. But when you please everyone, it often leads to no one being happy. In particularly you will be the most unhappy by not setting the boundary. And when that happens, that inevitably leads to burnout. Because when you're not setting boundaries, you're overextending yourself. You're not practicing self-care or professional self-care. And then that leads to burnout. So here are some 8 ways to establish healthy boundaries at work. These are not the only 8 ways. These are just some suggestions and recommendations. But the first and foremost is, again, remember I said reflection and that's self-awareness. You want to first assess your personal boundaries first, because again, if you have trouble setting personal boundaries, you may have trouble setting professional boundaries. And another great thing is that if you notice that there's challenges with boundary setting, you get to practice with your own personal boundaries, right? And the more you practice implementing your personal boundaries, the easier it will get for you to implement professional boundaries. You want to be an effective communicator. Like I said, we're going to go into effective communication in terms of professionalism and creating boundaries. You want to create clear structures. You want to be clear and concise around the structure around what it means to work with you. You want to delegate work when appropriate, whether you're in a management or a leadership position. Sometimes delegating work means asking for help. I have 5 things on my plate that are due by 5 p.m. I'm only going to get to 2 or 3. So sometimes you may be in a position where you can delegate, but sometimes you will be in a position where you simply may need to ask for help. You have to learn how to say no. I always like to say, before you say yes, you have to learn how to say no. Once you learn how to say no, then you can feel really good about your yeses. Has anyone ever had a time where you're, professionally saying yes, you say yes to something without thinking about it? And then once you're actually doing the task, and you may have said yes because you're really interested in helping out, you're interested in taking on that project, you're interested or, in the work that has to be done. And then when you're doing it, you're like, oh, why did I sign up for this? Why did I do this? Why did I say yes? That's because you have not practiced saying no enough. And then there has to be a very honest reflection about all of the yeses that you say. So you want to reflect on your yeses, and practice saying no. You want to use your time. You want to actually take time off. If you have time, use it, right? And so we'll talk about how professional self-care contributes to that. And you want to use technology to help. Technology helps in meetings. You have timers, you have mindfulness apps if you need to just take a quick break. Technology can be helpful. And then if it's not, I say, use technology in the ways that it can help you. This last way is not always applicable depending on the work that you do and the type of boundary that you have to create. But technology can help, particularly in professional self-care as well. So boundaries help with professional self-care. So we all, I think, are pretty familiar with what self-care means, right? But I like to also give another perspective when talking about self-care, excuse me, before we move on to professional self-care. Self-care is different than taking care of yourself. Excuse me. When you take care of yourself, to me, that means going to bed, getting up, going to work, brushing your teeth, eating, sleeping. That's taking care of yourself. Whereas self-care is about intentionally engaging in practices that contribute to your physical, emotional, mental, financial, spiritual well-being. And so the same way self-care has to be intentional and not just going through the motions of going through every day-to-day life, so is professional self-care. So of course, we're going to start off with some definitions. And personal self-care behaviors range from, like I mentioned, eating a well-balanced diet to seeking out fulfilling relationships to contribute to your overall well-being. And it has to be intentional and targeted. And professional self-care involves the engagement in practices that ensure balance and effectiveness in your professional role. So self-care, both types of self-care are very, very intentional, and professional self-care it has to be intentional as well. So professional self-care means using habits, processes, systems, and communities to make your work life sustainable. And I'll give some examples about that in a moment. It's usually a lot of debriefing yourself after crisis and creating better plans for later. You're usually able to, and professional self-care and self-care in general is great when you can be proactive, right? Set your time, set your schedule. You let your supervisor and your team know when you're available and when you're not. But sometimes things happen and crisis happen, or a situation was not handled in the best way for you professionally. That's when you have to think about, assess, and reflect, and think about how you will handle the situation later. Professional self-care is a vital part of creating work-life balance and boundaries. And that includes practicing self-care while at work and adopting self-care practices to lead a healthy work-life balance. So yes, you have to intentionally take care of yourself while intentionally focusing on self-care, but while you're at work, making sure that you focus on your professional self-care. And some examples are taking short breaks, especially if you sit at a desk. If a few things, you live in a neighborhood where you may not want to take a walk, where it may be wintertime, it may be cold outside, get up from your desk, stretch, move. This is one example where technology can come into play. You may want to play have an app. You may have, something you see on YouTube to just move your body, but you want to take breaks. You want to enjoy your lunch break, and that's not eating at your desk while reading something or eating at your desk. You want to step away. Research has shown that that's contributed to being able to reset and have a better and more productive workday. You want to leave work at work when you get home, but you want to acknowledge that what you do at home impacts how you will impacts how you show up professionally during the day. So you want to leave at work when you go home, but you want to be mindful of your habits that contribute to your professionalism in the office. From what does your morning look like? Are you on time? And so on. You want to use your vacation days and your sick days. And you want to not work on your vacation days or work on your sick days. You definitely, and I've heard this time and time again so many times throughout my professional career, where folks take off sick days and use sick days to catch up on work. Okay. And so that is where that's a surefire indication that you have to start focusing on professional self-care. Learn how to say no. Form supportive relationships with like-minded coworkers, and seek out new challenging projects or areas of professional development. And so now I want to invite you to take a moment. Are there other ways, when you think about your job, your work setting, your role, what are some things that you can do, or what is one thing that you can do that will contribute to your professional self-care? So in addition to professional boundaries, how can you focus on self-care? And while you do that, I just want to review the huge difference and similarities between self-care versus professional care, because they're both intertwined and they both impact each other. How you take care of yourself professionally is going to impact your home life. Your home life and how you take care of yourself personally is going to impact your professional life. Both start with boundaries. You have the self-awareness around what boundaries that you need to create or maintain, and then you set those and identify them. When it comes to personal and professional self-care, time management is key. Managing your time at home so that you can practice self-care, get a good night's rest, get up in the morning is just as important as the time management at work. Scheduling your day, not having meetings back to back, making sure that you take your lunch hour, and compensating for that if you do not, and as much as possible. If you're missing lunch, maybe change the time of day, or maybe leave a little earlier if you can, of course, and with the permission of your supervisor. Personal self-care oftentimes takes social support. You need friends, you need family, you need therapists, counselors, any type of social support for your personal self-care. With professional self-care, what helps is seeking a mentor and also seeking social support. And I like to say professional social support from professionals in your field. Joining professional networks so that you can identify with others in your field and how they take care of themselves. And so you want to seek social support in the ways that support your professional career. in the work that I do, as much as I love dancing and singing, a professional dancer may not help me with some of the coursework that I have, right, in my public health courses. So, but the dancer will help me in my personal self-care because I love to dance, right? So there's two different types of social support. Personal self-care contributes to your overall well-being, physical, mental, emotional, financial, all of the things that make you you. Professional self-care is strictly about your professional well-being. How are you being seen and talked about professionally? What words do people use when they talk about you and how you work and what you do for work? And personal self-care enhances your overall quality of life. When we focus on professional self-care, it's specifically with the purpose of enhancing the quality of our professional life. And so how do you do this? If you don't know what to do, just breathe and seek support. So what does that mean? Breathing, taking long, deep breaths, taking a walk, just taking a moment, that is always helps. The breath is one of your number one tools. If you notice, breath is given to women when they're giving birth, right? Lamaze is all about the breath. When someone is having, hyperventilating, they're given a brown paper bag or they're told to breathe in a specific way. So start with some deep breaths and seek support. Personally, seek the support that you need. And then professionally, I always like to say, please seek support from the person who is responsible for you. The person who is responsible for you is your supervisor, is the person who signs your timesheets, who has the power to promote you, who can hire or fire you. Those are the people that you seek support from professionally, not your coworker or your colleague or the person who's been at your job for the longest and may have the most influence in certain situations. But please professionally seek support from the person who is responsible for you, because they have a responsibility to help you. So professionally, you are never alone. And continue to attend webinars like this. There are lots and lots of trainings on professionalism, boundaries, setting boundaries, and effective communication. And so here are some of my resources. And I just wanted to say thank you. And I know that I had to leave some time for questions. But the last thing that I wanted to just note about communication is that there is a difference between assertive communication and aggressive communication. And so with assertive communication, you want to be clear and concise about what boundaries that you want to implement, about what you want to convey professionally, and you want to be mindful of your tone, timing, place, and how you feel emotionally. And so I just wanted to give that last tip around communication, because none of this helps unless it's communicated effectively. So it is true, it's not what you say and how you say it. And so I just want to just end with that note. Thank you for your participation. And now it's time for questions.
Right, terrific. And we do have a few questions. Let's get started. Someone says, sometimes I don't feel all that confident, but I know projecting a confident image is an important part of being perceived as professional. How should I handle it when this happens?
That's great. So remember, confidence comes from knowledge, and you may be asked a question, or you may be new on a particular topic or field. And so your confidence may come over time. But the key to that is being authentic. For example, if someone asks me a question on this webinar that I do not know about professionalism, I'm going to say, you know what, that's a great question. I'm not sure. And as hard as that may be, because I'm supposed to be the quote unquote expert on this webinar, right? The one thing that I feel is the most important is to just be authentic. Be authentic in how you're feeling. And in terms of building up confidence in your presentation and what you're supposed to convey, that takes knowing the knowledge and practice. So confidence in a presentation will be practicing. Confidence in a paper would be, getting all the up-to-date data, asking someone for their feedback, and so on. So in times that you are not feeling confident, I would say the more preparation you have, the better. But if you're caught on the spot, and you feel not confident, being honest and being authentic, I feel is one of the best approaches.
Great. All right, we have another question. A lot of the management where I work tend to spend a lot of time gossiping. I want to fit in with the office culture, but I don't really enjoy gossiping, nor do we think it's probably very professional. What should I do?
Yes. And so that question often comes up, not only with gossiping, but when managers and leaders often act and do the opposite of everything I may have reviewed in this entire webinar. And so again, you can never control someone else. You can only control you. And it sounds like not gossiping is a boundary, and it's okay. One thing about setting boundaries is that you have to be okay with people not liking what your boundary is. And that may result in them, not liking who you are professionally, and that's okay. I always say we are not at our job to make friends. We are at our job to have friendly relationships and build professional relationships. And in that, you have to be able to maintain a boundary. And so I had a supervisor one time that would tell me a lot of personal information, and it was very uncomfortable because of not only the information that I was receiving, but because I did not want to then give personal information in return. And it was a very difficult situation, but I had to just be honest, say, this makes me uncomfortable. I also do not want to share. I've been around departments where if someone calls out sick, they send every little symptom that they had. I'm the type of person that say, I'll be out sick today, and people will rely on me on the day that I come back, but they will know nothing about what I was out of the office for. And the reality is, here's the thing, people are going to gossip and talk about you anyway, right? And you have to also navigate that fine line of rapport and being friendly and sharing information. You did not get hired to share your personal information. You got hired to do a job. Now, while you're doing your job, do things get unprofessional and people become friends and share? Absolutely. But you get to decide how you want to show up. And you have to decide that, ahead of time. And sometimes you have to be proactive, also with social media. Sometimes what may happen is that supervisors like to befriend their employees. And I like to tell employees, you do not have to, unless it's part of your job description, become friends with someone personally or even on social media that you work with. And that can be an honest boundary that you set. And you can say, honestly, I'm not comfortable with that. Honestly, I don't mix, my personal social media with my job social media. I had a supervisor who kept requesting me on social media, and I kept ignoring it. And this person actually came up to me and said, hey, I keep trying to friend you. What's going on? I said, I know. Wow. I said, one of my boundaries is, I said that I really don't engage with my coworkers on social media. And that's just something that helps me show up better. And again, it was how I said it. But I didn't avoid it. I didn't say, oh, sorry. Oh, I will. I didn't go back and friend that person really quickly. I was really honest. Like, you know what? This is just something that, means a lot to me. And I said it in a way, and it was well, and the person was like, oh, okay. That's great. Okay, now I know, and so a lot is how you say it. And remember, you're hired to do a job. There's always going to be someone that's going to be talking about you. And I'd rather somebody talk about me and me not gossiping than talk about how, bad I was doing my job or how I was maybe spreading gossip throughout the office. So part of it is you have to just not care and do your and do your job.
Yep.
I have not seen one job description that includes gossiping, even when in that part that says other duties as described.
So true. All right, let's see. We have a few more. How do you handle an employer that acts beyond what you consider appropriate? And you've kind of addressed that, but when do you say I quit?
Right. So you say you quit when you can and have another job, right? I said, but I say that that's why I said seek support. You first want to have communication and try to communicate with your supervisor. If that doesn't help, then hopefully this person has a supervisor, unless they're the CEO or executive director. But usually there's an entity that they have to answer to. But you want to try to communicate the issue, and then you want to seek any kind of support, whether it's human resources or whatever legal support that you have at your employer. But first, I say try to resolve it with the person first. If not, then seek the support that you need from a higher level.
Okay. Michael says, how do you be assertive, say no, to a boss who doesn't listen to your concerns about being overwhelmed with work? They're passing their work down to you.
Yes. So great. So that's a great question. What you do is that you go back to, I always say, go back to your job description, go back to, if you have any evaluations or anything that you can refer to, go back to think back to your first day at work when your supervisor gave you directions, or, you started planning for your role. And so it comes down to what you were hired to do and for how long. If you were hired for an 8-hour workday, you then need to convey to your supervisor, this is how much time I have to work from, Monday through Friday, or whatever your work schedule is. And you sit down with your supervisor and you discuss, this is the amount of time that I have to work, and this is the amount of work that I have to do. Can you help me prioritize this? And so that way you have all the work that your supervisor gave you, you have all the work that you were given, and you seek support and you ask your supervisor, can you help me prioritize this, because I don't anticipate being able to get this done. Now, I'm saying this in a way that I know that it may not be easy. Your supervisor may be hard to talk to, but that's why you have to go back to what you were hired to do and setting boundaries as soon as possible. Knowing that some of you may be in situations where you have to be reactive, you've been in positions for long, you can always course correct, but it starts with clear communication. Please help me prioritize, and going to who can give you guidance.
Yeah, excellent. Kind of a similar situation here with another question, but in this case, it's not the boss, it's a coworker. So she writes, I have one coworker who's always asking me to do things that aren't really my responsibility. I don't want to appear unhelpful, but I don't have time to help her all the time. What should I do? So slightly different scenario.
Yes. Again, it comes back to communication. And this is another, communication is a key, this 3 and 5 day trainings, because communication is a skill. What I'm hearing is that there's some empathy and compassion. However, you just don't have the capacity. And being authentic and telling your coworker, I would love to help you, unfortunately, I cannot. And just being honest about that is the first thing. I have to be honest. In the end, if you still say yes and help that person, you cannot blame this person, right? You have to say no. It goes back to, you have to learn how to say no and be comfortable with the no, not say no and feel guilty afterward. You want to be comfortable with the no. Explain to the person, it's not that I don't care and I don't want to, I just can't and I don't have the capacity. If a person is taking advantage and they still are putting things on you, you want to discuss it with them first. If it doesn't get resolved, and then you go to your supervisor and say, I have various colleagues asking me for work that I cannot accomplish, and then your supervisor should help you. But when it's a colleague, when it's relationship, again, how you communicate things and communicating them authentically. But this goes back to being able to say no, before you say yes.
Yeah.
And not and knowing, I just want to say that a lot of this is easier said than done, because you don't want people to feel bad, but no one is going to take care of you but you. And so it's up to you to set that priority and boundary for yourself.
Yeah, really valid point. I mean,
it gets
some of these conversations, right? They aren't always easy, but you feel better once you've had them. So it's important to take that approach. All right, so we're a little after one. We'll do one more question. How can I make others feel at ease and comfortable when I interview them? I want to make sure I'm inclusive and welcoming to everyone, especially when people are new to professional workplace.
That's a great question. I think that it starts with what a person feels when they walk into your workspace. So it starts with not only you as the individual, but how a person feels when they enter your workspace. And so it goes, I like to say aesthetics start with making a person feel comfortable. If it's online and virtual, it's about, again, using inclusive language, asking for preferred pronouns, just, being honest if there's an uncomfortable situation, I'm not familiar with your culture or with, something. It's about being authentic and just being able to make sure that the language is being inclusive and that who you're talking to. It's hard for me to answer that question with it being so general, but think that it's about knowing your audience, knowing who you're speaking to, knowing who's in the room. And what is the goal? If the goal of the interview is to get to know a person, to ask questions, if they're doing a presentation, if it's a third interview, is just setting the stage and being proactive around, welcome, I appreciate you being here. This is what we're going to do today, and so on.
Okay, great.
So those are just some quick tips.
Now, we did have a few questions we didn't get to. So for those folks, I will be sharing Dena's contact information in my follow-up email. And so I'm sure if you really need that question answered and you reach out to her, she'll share her thoughts on that. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Dena, thank you so much. I think there were so many great tips and takeaways today. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope to see you again at a future webinar. Good afternoon to everybody.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.